What's up, Call of Duty fans? Welcome back. We've got ourselves the final stage of RosterMania. All of the time limits have been met. 8 o'clock p.m. was the deadline for final moves, and everything has been submitted. We've got a lot of very interesting things to go over, so let's go ahead and dig straight into it. Now, I want to go back as far as what we talked about in our last video. We had a couple of different graphics pulled up for you guys as far as who was making changes as far as teams. We weren't reporting on any rumors. We just wanted to report on things that were for sure, and so we're going to kind of recap that real quick and dig into the final moves and kind of set things up as far as what the pools look like going into Fort Worth. Also, beyond this video, I will be doing individual team moves on some of these squads, as well as a new power rankings video. So those are things to look forward to over the next week, but let's dig into it. I don't want to delay any further. These were the teams that we knew for sure were not going to be making any changes, although there was a little bit of bait today, potentially, with Clayster linking things, but not going to make a difference. These teams made absolutely no changes to their rosters, and we're making that pretty clear, at least through the halfway point of the week. Luminosity, Optic, 100 Thieves, E United, Heretics, and Denial. None of them making any roster changes at all. Now, there were that little bit of a rumor mill that EU was going through some drama with Clayster and Pristini, and everybody in the EU wanted to get rid of Clayster, but the organization didn't want to drop Clayster, so Clay responded with how he wanted to drop Pristini, and a bunch of drama going on with that. We'll talk more about United in future videos, but it kind of leaves the question of, will this team still be as fully functional as they were from things at Vegas, as well as obviously in the 2 weeks that we saw them currently in Division B from the regular season. Will they still be a high-performing team with this drama going on? Can they overcome that? That seems to be the question. These were teams that we were awaiting info on. We didn't have a for sure if they were locking in or not locking in their rosters. That was Red Reserve, Enigma 6, Team Envy, and Splice. Since then, we have now learned that Enigma 6 will be the only team making adjustments. We'll talk more about them just here in a moment. And then the teams that we knew for sure had made moves or were making moves were Evil Geniuses after Facento had been dropped / retired. You also have Reciprocity, who moved Dens in for Dylan in for Dens and the sub to main roster role. Gen.G, of course, was basically being dropped away to the free agency market. That was obviously another consideration going into today. And then UYU had also made some moves, having dropped off Skies, as well as also taking Proofs off the roster completely. Now, and then the last category, who knew what was going on with Midnight Esports and Excelerate? Obviously, a lot of things have kind of been stirring the pot, but we'll talk about that team near the end. Let's start with things as far as who we were not sure we were waiting info from. That was Enigma 6. So taking a look at what they had going in, it was General Diabolic, Kismet, Cade, and Frosty. Those were the 5 that ended up putting up a 3-4 record. They were 12-16 in maps. They will drop away Cade and pick up Chino, who was previously with G2 throughout the PLQ, did not have the greatest of performances, was dropped from G2 after the PLQ, so he was a free agent and will be picked up. You can take a look at some of the stats for this team as they go. And my general reactions here with Chino for Cade is, yes, Enigma 6, you had to make a move. And honestly, between General, Diabolic, and Cade, those were probably some of the 3 that would be mostly considered. And honestly, Cade makes the most sense based on his performance and his lack of kind of performance in general. But the thing about Chino, as my first reaction, is he kind of costed G2. I won't say it full on, but he did not play well at all at the PLQ. So that's one of my biggest things with G2 is, did you really make a good move here? There were a lot of people that were available that could have been filling in that flex role that you're looking for with Cade being dropped away. Is Chino really the best fit? You take a look, this is a team that's currently 5th place in Division B. They're only 2-7 in Search and Destroy, which, to be fair, G2 was actually a lot better at Search and Destroy than most of their other modes. At least as consistency goes, you look at the averages from how they performed as a full team. But is Chino really the answer that you need? You're going into Pool B, and that's not an easy pool by any stretch of the imagination. Just to tell you briefly, that's 100 Thieves, Red Reserve, and Evil Geniuses also in the mix for Enigma 6. And you would think that Enigma 6, based on their performance in the past, should have a pretty decent time getting into the top 2, but there's obviously going to be a lot of work need to be done with Chino into the mix. So that's just the change that you're going to be seeing from them. We'll switch over to Gen.G, who also, obviously, we mentioned, had dropped away Spacely to the free agency market. And this was pretty much already confirmed before it was confirmed. A lot of scrims versus Optic yesterday. It will be Envoy coming in place for Spacely. You take a look at Gen.G, and this was a big conversation point for a lot of people in the community, was this team's 6-1. Why are you dropping Spacely? You guys are on top of Division A. The problem is, yeah, you're 6-1, and that looks good on paper, but then you look a little bit deeper into the fine print. They're 9-0 in Search and Destroy. Best team, without a doubt, in Search and Destroy as far as record. But the problem is your respawn in total, combining Hardpoint and Control, you're only 10-11. And they're the 5th worst in hardpoint in CWL based on record and averages considered between whoever else is at the bottom. So that's not good. Yes, you can sit there and say that Search and Destroy wins championships, but if you can't win a respawn, at least not consistently, you don't want to put it up the chance that you're just going to always win out every single search. People are going to get better at search. So I like the fact that they made a change, and honestly, I'm okay with Spacely getting moved out because he was not performing at the same level that the rest of the team was, especially when it comes to winning face-up gunfights. That's the biggest thing. Isolated gunfights were not going in the way of Spacely. More often than not, he was typically a part of bait and switches as well as duo challenges, and even most of the time, he was being the one who was being traded out. So you need to find an entry fragger that can really hold their own. Envoy was definitely one of them for Midnight, so we'll see how this one ends up playing out. Pool A for them, this is again, they're on top of the pool, but it's not an easy pool by any stretch. You have Team Heretics that's in there that's obviously going to put up a really good fight, and you cannot sleep on UIU or Denial. I could see these teams putting up a pretty difficult front for both of those, what would be assumed top 2 teams in Pool A. So you can't just sleep on those 2 teams. I like the fact that they're making a change, even if it doesn't necessarily provide instant results for this land in specific. I think this is the best move for the longevity of the team, so I'm actually really okay with this move as a whole. Evil Geniuses will be the next one up. Again, we mentioned that Facento has officially been drop/retired, so Gunjar, Royalty, Fellow, and Exotic, they will be staying, but Attach will be joining on loan again from FaZe, which again, the legalities of that is mind-blowing to me. I don't even want to know what that looks like as far as who's paying who what, and that just looks like a giant mess in a handbasket, but whatever, doesn't make a difference. He will be playing, at least for this LAN and for the foreseeable future, with this roster of Evil Geniuses. Obviously, their current record is not good. 1-6, 7-19 overall in maps, currently in last place in Division A. They will be playing in Pool B as well, like we mentioned previously, in Fort Worth. But the biggest thing is they have not won a Search and Destroy yet. So bringing in a veteran like Attach, I think, is really smart. The thing about it is he was a consistent player. When we did a video long while back as his best potential free agents, he was in our top 25 overall. I don't know if I had him in my top 15. I can't really remember, to be completely candid with you. But again, you take a look at how they performed in their first 2 weeks, and it was not pretty at all. Only winning a couple of maps until they finally met up against a very weakened Reciprocity roster that they were able to beat. So expectations for this team, it just comes down to what they were able to do growth-wise over the last couple of weeks. My expectations are not super high. You know, this is a team that got a lot of clout because they're rocking the Evil Geniuses tag from Vegas. They had a really hot Friday at Vegas and did not perform very well throughout the rest of that first LAN. Obviously, the PLQ was very solid for them. They got the insta-bid to get into the CWL, not having to go through the bracket, so things went well for them there. But then, obviously, it was an instant struggle as soon as they got to the CWL. So a move had to be made. It just comes down to me, was this enough of a move? Will there need to be more in the future? Has this been enough to actually make this team a competitor? Because right now, they're not really competing with anybody. We'll switch over to UIU, another team that we knew was making moves based off of them dropping Skies, and that drop would actually move Skies over to the new Accelerate roster. But in replacement of Skies, you've got Parzillion joining, and I love this move a lot. I think that this is the best move that UIU could have potentially made. Obviously, you take advantage of Midnight, who's dealing with God knows what issues over there organizationally, but the fact of the matter is Parzillion is one of the highest damage outputting ICRs in the game, but it's not just his ICR gameplay that's strong. It's also his Maddox gameplay that is extremely solid. So now you're looking at a backline setup of Mayhem, Methods, and Parzillion, and then you've got Proto and Knight up front. The SOG line does not super impress me, but that Maddox and AR line is absolutely nasty. I'm really excited to see this team play. They're sitting in 5th place in Division A. They're 3-4, 12-16 overall in maps, and they had a lot of close sets with even in those losses. They'll be playing in Pool A as well, like we mentioned before. But the biggest thing is they need to start to bone things up in the Search and Destroy. They're the 3rd worst in the CWL, sitting at just 2-7. But Parzillion is one of the strongest S&D ARs out there right now. So this is 100% an upgrade for UIU. They have just become a very strong competitor in my book because of this switch from Skies to Parzillion. Speaking of, let's dig into the Harry Jerry stuff. I don't know why I said the Harry Jerry. That's a weird word to say, Shift. But regardless, here's what you need to know about the last big roster changes. Obviously, Accelerate, they've dropped just about everybody they said that they were going to, at least. And there was all that drama with Beehzy and all of that. Let's take a look at what they were able to do. They do drop Beehzy, Robbie B, and Believe to the free agent market. They hold on to Profizi and M. Ruiz, and they pick up Brack, Jet Li, and Skies. Now, there were a lot of rumors about who was potentially in looks for being picked up for this roster, and none of that ended up being very true in the early week speculations. But you take a look at this team, They're going into the Fort Worth land at 1-6, only winning 9 maps. They are last in Division B. They'll be playing in a very difficult pool in Pool C. It should have been a very competitive pool, but they average a terrible hard point. Now, Brack and Jet Li add a lot to the team, I think personally. It's definitely an upgrade in some instances. However, Skies for Beehzy, not an upgrade, I don't think whatsoever. And then M. Ruiz being the one that gets held onto instead of Beehzy, I think is also a pretty solid mistake. I don't think M. Ruiz has played all that well. Profeezy is very good to hold on to. Brack has done well with the Maddox. Jet Li and Profeezy should do well, but I'm worried about this bracket M. Ruiz Maddox line and Skies as the ICR. I don't think that Skies is playing super well with UIU and their pacing, and they were a slower team. Accelerate had kind of established themselves throughout the PLQ of being a fast-based team. Obviously, that's not going to be much of a case. Jet Li does play very aggressively, so does Brack. Profeezy can get involved as well, but if you don't have M. Ruiz and Skies following up, you're going to be seeing a lot of very staggered moments across respawns, which has not been their strongest. That's my biggest thing is, can this team gel and find coordinated hits in time to break hard points? Yes, you can win rotations off face-off gunfights and playing aggressive. Brack and Jet Li, I think, and Profeezy alone, those three can win enough face-off gunfights to get them early rotations, but it comes down to when they get broken or when they don't win rotates, can they break hills? And that's been the biggest problem for this team in the past. I'm excited to see how this team plays, but I will say that I am more cautious than optimistic when it comes to the phrase cautiously optimistic about these improvements, because I think that Beehzy was a very staggered loss for this team. I don't think Skies is a solid replacement. Brack and Jet Li in for Believe in Robbie B. Sure, M. Ruiz, though, not exactly the most solid player ever either that I've seen so far. So a lot more questions than answers, I think, based on the changes for Accelerate going through. Of course, a lot of drama going in with Midnight as well. They're not exempt from what Accelerate was facing, just at a little bit of a lower scale. They have dropped essentially everybody and found a number of very surprising free agents, considering all of the drama that was going on with potentially players not getting paid or bad contracts, whatever it happened to be. I guess that got figured out, but Brack, Jet Li, Parzelian, Envoy, they all got moved to different teams. So as you see them there, but the biggest thing is the pickups that they were able to find. The first that was announced was Saints, and then was immediately followed up later on, or late today rather, on Friday, with Parasite, Lacefield, and Blast. And my reactions to these pickups are all over the board. So you're looking at a roster of Llama God, Saints, Parasite, Lacefield, and Blast. This is a team that was sitting very impressively at a 5-2, 17-9. Obviously, they're second place in division behind Gen.G, who they were able to beat at the end of week 2. They're again playing in Pool C, which should be a very interesting pool. With Splice Luminosity being in the mix there, and obviously this Accelerate team that we were talking about. They also were boasting the best hardpoint record in CWL. So losing all 4 of your 5 players that were doing the greatest work for you in Respawn hurts this team a lot. Synergy is going to be all over the place, and here's my general reaction. Saints and Parasite have played together before. It didn't go so well. Saints was not performing with the Pittsburgh Knights. Also was not performing with Evil Geniuses. Has been dropped off of 2 teams so far this year. Parasite, I think, is arguably a top 5 ICR in the game. It comes down to, can he flex properly onto a Maddox when necessary, and will he be able to perform with it? The biggest question mark here is, how the heck did they get Lacefield? How does this team pick up Lacefield, who I would say was a top 2 free agent between him and Decimate, restricted free agents from G2. Midnight's able to put I'm going to assume a fairly stark investment to get Lacefield off of that restricted free agent list. That's a huge pickup. It definitely compensates for the fact that you lost Jet Li and you lost Envoy, your front 2 runners as far as the SOG gameplay goes. But the biggest problem here is Blast was also not a player that I was impressed with when it came down to the PLQ. So for Lacefield and Saints to be likely playing the SOG line, and then you're going to be dealing with Llama God and Blast with the Maddoxes, Parasite with the ICR. That would be my likely setup, I would guess. I don't know if I feel confident in it. I like the pickup of Parasite and Lacefield. I'm not 100% sold on Saints or Blast. I've been hearing lately that Blast has been fragging a lot and has been able to swatch onto SOG gameplay a lot more often. So it's potential that he could also be playing with Lacefield. They've got some synergy from G2, and who knows, that very well could be successful because Saints is a little bit more recognized for his Maddox gameplay in this game. So I don't want to get too deep into that. I'm going to talk more about that individually about this roster, but again, I'm more cautious than optimistic, although there is a very stark intrigue with picking up Parasite and Lacefield into the squad and bringing in 2 sets of duos that have experience with each other. It just comes down to who's going to take over the IGL role and who can really get this team reined in, ready to go, because they also did drop Atura, who was their coach previously, so who knows what's going on with that. Let's take a look back at the pools, though, just to get you familiar with what's going on. We'll wrap this video up for you. Again, here's Pool A: Gen.G, Heretics, UYU, and Denial. Gen.G and UYU are the 2 teams that, again, made those small changes in Pool A. So expectations might be a little bit different, but I think for the most part, you're expected to see Gen.G and Heretics near the top. But UYU, I think, made a very strong pickup bringing in Parzelian. So they very well could be a major contender in this pool. Pool B, 100 Thieves, Red Reserve, Enigma 6, and Evil Geniuses. You would have to figure that with 100 Thieves looking as solid as they did in the second week of Division B, that they're still going to be up top there after even all these changes that were coming through for E6 and Evil Geniuses. I don't think it's going to be enough to make them major competitors. This should still be a very competitive pool if Red Reserve can play consistently, if 100 Thieves can play consistently, and the changes end up benefiting Enigma 6 and also obviously Evil Geniuses, but expectations are, I think, generally a little bit lower for Evil Geniuses in that pool. Pool C, Midnight Esports, Splice, Luminosity, and Accelerate. And this is the biggest question mark because Splice had a very bad week 2. Luminosity had a strong week 2, but a very weak week 1, say that 10 times fast, and then Midnight and Accelerate made all those crazy changes. So who's going to happen to be on top in Pool C? Kind of hard to guess. I think it's honestly going to come down to who just shows up that day and time. And then you've got Pool D at the very end: Optic, E-United, Envy, and Reciprocity. These are the teams that did the least amount of moves, just essentially moving sub the main roster for Reciprocity. So I think the expectations are generally going to be about the same for these guys here. So that's all I got for this one. I will be doing another power rankings video based off of these moves. I will be also highlighting at least Midnight and Accelerate specifically with full team cards and stats and all that to kind of give you an idea as far as what they had versus what they're going in with. And then we'll kind of just break things down, get you guys ready for Fort Worth. I'm excited for it. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, it's a pleasure having you guys. I'm glad that you found the channel. Hope you enjoy the production value and the quick hit analysis and recaps. We will be doing these regularly, so if you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe to get notifications on when we hit those videos live. Ring that bell. And until next time, hope you keep pulling it down. Later, bye-bye.